The wedding hall still echoed with laughter and music, the scent of fresh flowers hanging in the air like a sweet memory. Guests clinked their glasses, raising toasts to the newlyweds, unaware that within the next 45 minutes, joy would turn into shock and celebration into tragedy. The bride, glowing just moments ago, would be gone, forever. And the reason? It would leave everyone speechless. Anya had been dreaming of this day since she was a little girl. She wasn't just any bride. She was the kind of person who brought life to every room she entered, with a smile that could melt the coldest hearts and a laugh that made sadness disappear. She had a way of making people feel like they belonged. Today, in her white lace wedding gown, she looked like a vision straight out of a fairy tale. The love of her life, Karan, stood beside her, holding her hand tightly as they greeted guests, both of them basking in the warmth of the moment. Everything had gone perfectly. The vows were exchanged with teary eyes. The first dance had left everyone in awe, and the cake, 3 tiers of vanilla and chocolate, was cut to applause. Friends and family cheered as Anya and Karan fed each other a piece, their happiness evident in the way they looked at each other. They had waited years for this day, overcoming obstacles that had tried to keep them apart. But fate had other plans. As the night continued, Anya felt an odd sensation creeping into her body. A dull ache in her stomach, a strange weakness in her limbs. She ignored it at first, brushing it off as exhaustion from the long day. But then it got worse. Much worse. She clutched Karan's arm, her nails digging into his skin. I don't feel right, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chatter around them. He turned to her, concern flashing in his eyes. Are you okay? He asked, his hand tightening around hers. But before she could respond, her legs gave out beneath her. Gasps filled the hall as she collapsed onto the floor. Guests rushed toward her, voices overlapping in panic. Someone shouted for a doctor. Someone else called for an ambulance. Karan dropped to his knees, shaking her gently. Anya! Anya! Talk to me! His voice cracked with fear. Her breathing was shallow now, her lips turning a shade too pale. The music had stopped. The laughter had died. In its place, a chilling silence took over. The bride, just married, just starting a new life, was slipping away. But why? What had happened in those 45 minutes after the wedding that led to this heartbreaking moment? And the truth would shock everyone. The wedding hall was no longer filled with laughter. Instead, the air was thick with tension, panic spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Karan's hands trembled as he held Anya, his heart racing with fear. Her skin had gone cold, her breath shallow and uneven. The guests stood frozen, whispers of confusion and terror rippling through the once joyous gathering. Call an ambulance! Someone shouted again, but another voice snapped back. It's already on the way! Karan's mind was spinning. Just moments ago, she had been smiling, laughing, standing beside him, full of life. And now she was slipping away right before his eyes. He felt helpless, his pulse pounding in his ears as he cradled her in his arms. Anya, stay with me, he pleaded, his voice breaking. Her lips parted, but no words came. Just a faint gasp, her eyes struggling to stay open. Anya, the girl, who had always been so full of energy, who had fought through every storm in her life, looked so fragile now. The ambulance arrived within minutes, though to Karan it felt like hours. The paramedics rushed in, pushing people aside, checking Anya's pulse, her vitals. They asked Karan questions, but his mind was clouded with fear. He barely understood what they were saying. Was this happening? Was this real? They lifted Anya onto a stretcher, wheeling her out as fast as they could. Karan followed, his hands shaking, his throat dry. He climbed into the ambulance, holding onto her hand, whispering prayers under his breath. As they sped through the city streets, sirens, blaring, memories flooded his mind. Anya wasn't just his wife. She was his best friend, his first love, the one person who had truly understood him. They had met years ago, in the most unexpected way. She had been standing at a roadside tea stall, arguing with the vendor over the price of a cup of chai. Karan had watched, amused, as she passionately defended her point, refusing to back down. He had never seen someone so fearless over something so small. That was Anya, strong, stubborn, full of fire. Their love story wasn't perfect. It had its fair share of struggles. Anya's parents had been against their relationship at first, believing Karan wasn't the right match for their daughter. They wanted someone with a stable career, a secure future. But Karan, he was a dreamer, someone who wanted to build his own path, refusing to be tied down by expectations. For years, they had fought against the odds, proving to the world, and to themselves, that their love was worth it. And today, they had finally made it. They had exchanged vows, promised forever, but forever was slipping away. At the hospital, the doctors rushed Anya into the emergency room. Karan was left outside, pacing, his hands in his hair, his mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. Family members began arriving, their faces painted with worry. Anya's mother was in tears, her father standing stiffly beside her, his expression unreadable. "What happened?" her father demanded. "She was fine. She was perfectly fine." Karan didn't know how to answer. He didn't know what had gone wrong. One moment she had been dancing, laughing, full of life. And then, this. The waiting was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity. Karan clenched his fists, his thoughts running wild. Was it something she ate? The food had been carefully planned, every dish tasted beforehand. Had someone slipped something into her drink? But why? Who would do such a thing? Or was it something else entirely? Something hidden. Something no one had seen coming. Finally, after what felt like hours, a doctor emerged from the room, his face serious. Karan rushed forward. "Is she okay? Please tell me she's okay." The doctor hesitated, glancing at the family before speaking. "She's stable for now, but we need to run more tests. There's something we need to understand." Karen's heart pounded. "What do you mean? What's wrong with her?" The doctor sighed. "We're not sure yet, but there's something unusual." "Did Anya have any medical conditions? Any allergies? Anything at all?" Karan shook his head. "No, nothing. She's always been healthy." The doctor exchanged a look with his colleagues before saying, "Then we need to consider other possibilities." Other possibilities. Karen's stomach dropped. What were they not saying? What was happening to Anya? As the hours passed, the hospital room became a space filled with unanswered questions. The tests were conducted, results awaited. Karan sat by Anya's bedside, holding her hand, whispering to her, even though she couldn't respond. But as the night stretched on, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a medical emergency. Something else was at play. And the truth, when it came, would shake everyone to their core. The hours crawled by, heavy with uncertainty. Karan sat by Anya's side, his fingers gently wrapped around hers. The steady beep of the monitors was the only sound. In the room, a painful reminder that time was slipping away. She looked so peaceful, so still, but the truth was far from it. She was fighting a battle no one could understand. Doctors moved in and out, whispering in hushed voices. Tests were being conducted, results analyzed, but no one had any answers. The fear in Karan's heart only grew with every passing moment. He replayed the wedding day in his mind over and over again, searching for something, anything, that could explain what had gone wrong. Then, finally, the doctor returned, his expression unreadable. Karen stood immediately, his chest tight with anxiety. "We have the results," the doctor said, his voice calm but serious. The family gathered closer, bracing themselves. "It's poisoning." The word sent a shiver through the room. Gasps filled the air. Anya's mother clutched her chest. Her father's face turned pale. "Poisoning?" Karan's voice cracked. "What do you mean? How? Who?" The doctor hesitated. "It wasn't accidental. This was deliberate. Deliberate." The word cut through Karan like a blade. Someone had done this to Anya. Someone had wanted to harm her on her wedding day. His mind reeled, struggling to comprehend the reality. The wedding. The food. The drinks. The guests. Someone among them had been responsible. But who? And why? A knock at the door interrupted the silence. A police officer stepped in, his face grim. "Mr. Karen, we need to speak with you." The world felt like it was closing in. Karan swallowed hard. "Did you find something?" The officer nodded. "We analyzed the wedding footage. We interviewed the staff, and we have a lead." He hesitated before adding, "The poison was in Anya's drink. It was slipped into her glass moments before she collapsed." Karen's heart pounded. His mind raced through the faces at the wedding. Friends, family, colleagues. Who could have done this? Then, the officer pulled out a photograph from the surveillance footage. "We have a suspect." Karan looked at the image, and his breath caught in his throat. It was someone he knew, someone he never would have suspected. Anya's childhood friend, Mira. Mira, who had been by Anya's side since they were kids. Mira, who had stood right beside her at the wedding, smiling, laughing. Mira, who had toasted to their happiness. "No." Karan shook his head in disbelief. "That's not possible. Mira loved Anya. She wouldn't." The officer's expression remained firm. "We confronted her. She confessed." Confessed. Karan's world shattered. Mira had poisoned Anya. But why? The answer was as shocking as the act itself. Mira had been in love with Karan for years, and she had never been able to accept that Anya had won his heart. She had smiled through their love story, pretending to be happy, while inside, resentment had been growing. On the wedding day, she had made a choice. If she couldn't have Karen, no one would. It was jealousy. It was heartbreak, and it was betrayal in its cruelest form. Karan felt like he couldn't breathe. He had known Mira for so long, had trusted her. And now, because of her, Anya lay in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. Hours passed in a blur. Mira was arrested. The evidence was undeniable. The wedding had been meant to be the start of something beautiful, but it had turned into something out of a nightmare. And then, just when Karan had almost lost all hope, Anya stirred. Her fingers twitched. A soft breath escaped her lips. And then slowly, painfully, her eyes fluttered open. Karan gasped, gripping her hand tighter. "Anya," she blinked, her gaze weak but filled with recognition. "Karan." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Tears slipped down his face. Relief, gratitude, love. It all rushed through him at once. She was here. She had survived. Days later, as Anya recovered, the truth fully unfolded. Mira's jealousy had pushed her to an unforgivable act, but justice had been served. The nightmare was over. And though the wedding day would always carry painful memories, it also became a symbol of something stronger. Love's resilience. Anya and Karan had fought through every storm, and this was no different. As he held her hand, promising to never let go, he knew one thing for certain. Their story wasn't ending here. It was just beginning.